Hey buddy, somewhere, someone is furious. Not because you did anything wrong to them recently. Not because you crossed a line or broke a promise. They're furious because you're supposed to be falling apart right now, and instead, you're thriving. That was never part of their plan. Whatever damage they caused, the betrayal, the ending, the cruelty they walked away from without looking back, they expected a specific outcome. They expected devastation. They expected you crumbling, calling, begging for explanation, spiraling into whatever wreckage they assumed their absence would leave behind. Before we begin, I have something special for you. The complete 6-book doctrine is now available as one powerful collection. The Joker Mindset, the Iron Mind, the Silent King, the Lone Wolf, the Mind Architect, Borrowed Time. 6 books, one complete journey into discipline, mental strength, self-mastery, influence, and personal transformation. If you're ready to go beyond the videos and take these ideas deeper, this collection was made for you. For a limited time, you can get all 6 books at a special discounted price. The link is in the description, and if these messages have inspired you, challenged you, or helped you keep moving forward, you can support this mission through the Super Thanks link in the description. And instead, you did something they never accounted for. You kept living. You kept building. You kept moving forward with a peace they never anticipated you'd be capable of reaching this quickly, if at all. That peace is currently ruining their entire narrative. And it's making them absolutely furious in ways they probably can't fully articulate, even to themselves. Why someone needs you to suffer in the first place. Because understanding this need reveals exactly what's driving their current frustration. When people cause harm, especially harm significant enough to end a relationship or fracture a connection, most carry some level of guilt beneath the surface, whether they admit it consciously or not. That guilt requires management, and one of the most common management strategies involves needing evidence that the harm actually mattered. If you're suffering visibly, if your devastation confirms their significance in your life, it provides a strange kind of validation. Proof that what happened between you carried real weight, that they mattered enough to cause this level of destruction. Your unexpected peace denies them that validation entirely. Instead of confirming their significance, your resilience suggests something they never wanted to consider, that maybe they weren't as essential to your happiness as they assumed, that maybe you're capable of thriving without them far more easily than their ego prepared them to accept. That realization threatens the entire story they'd constructed about their own importance in your life. Consider, too, the specific narrative someone often builds after causing harm, because that narrative usually depends heavily on your continued suffering to remain intact. People rarely enjoy seeing themselves as villains, even when someone behaves badly, causing genuine damage through betrayal, cruelty, or abandonment. They typically construct some internal justification that softens their own role in the story. Maybe they tell themselves you'll eventually understand why they had to leave. Maybe they convince themselves the relationship was doomed regardless, that they simply accelerated an inevitable ending. Whatever specific justification they've constructed, it usually depends on believing the damage, while regrettable, was somehow necessary or unavoidable. Your visible thriving disrupts that justification completely. If you're doing well, moving forward, building a life that looks nothing like the devastation they anticipated, it becomes much harder for them to maintain whatever comfortable story excused their behavior in the first place. Your peace becomes evidence contradicting their narrative, and that contradiction produces exactly the frustration you're witnessing now. Let's explore the specific mechanics of what happens when someone discovers you're not suffering as expected, because the reaction often unfolds in a fairly predictable pattern. Initial disbelief usually arrives first. A refusal to accept what they're witnessing, an assumption that your composure must be performance, that beneath the surface you're actually struggling exactly as anticipated, simply hiding it more skillfully than expected. This disbelief often manifests as probing behavior, attempts to check in, to gauge your emotional state directly, searching for cracks in what appears to be genuine peace. When those cracks fail to appear, frustration typically follows. This frustration might show up as increased attempts at contact, sudden reappearances after periods of silence, almost as if testing whether their presence alone can finally trigger the devastation that failed to materialize on its own. Sometimes it shows up more indirectly. Comments relayed through mutual friends, social media behavior clearly designed to provoke a reaction, subtle attempts to reinsert themselves into your awareness specifically to disrupt whatever peace you've managed to construct without them. Now let's talk about why this reaction, however uncomfortable to witness, actually confirms something important about the power dynamic that's shifted permanently in your favor. Someone genuinely unaffected by your well-being wouldn't notice you're thriving at all, let alone feel frustrated by it. Indifference doesn't produce anger. Only investment produces anger, and their obvious frustration reveals that they're still tracking your emotional state, still measuring their own significance against whatever evidence your life provides. That tracking behavior means you retained something they didn't expect to lose, control over your own narrative, regardless of how invested they remain in disrupting it. This is worth sitting with fully. The person who caused you pain is now watching your life from a distance, unable to influence the outcome the way they once could. Furious, specifically because your peace exists entirely outside their control. That's not a small victory. That's evidence of exactly how thoroughly you've reclaimed ownership over your own emotional trajectory. Something important about the specific vulnerability required to reach this point, because your peace didn't arrive automatically or without significant effort behind it. Whatever pain you experienced from this situation was real, regardless of how composed you might appear now. Reaching genuine peace after significant hurt requires deliberate work, processing grief rather than suppressing it, rebuilding self-worth that might have been damaged during the relationship, consciously choosing growth over the easier path of remaining stuck in resentment or devastation. This process rarely happens overnight, and anyone assuming your peace arrived effortlessly is underestimating exactly how much internal work you've likely done to reach this point. That effort deserves recognition, especially from yourself. You didn't simply get lucky, escaping the devastation they expected through some accident of temperament. You actively built the resilience currently frustrating them so thoroughly, through choices made consistently over time that prioritized your own healing over remaining trapped in whatever pain their actions initially caused. Consider, too, how you should respond to their frustration, because your reaction here matters significantly for protecting the peace you've already built. Resist the temptation to explain your happiness to them, to justify your thriving as though it requires their approval or understanding. That impulse, however natural, actually undermines the independence your peace represents. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing to heal, for choosing to move forward, for refusing to remain trapped in suffering simply because someone else expected or even wanted that outcome from you. Resist, too, the temptation to perform your happiness deliberately for their benefit, turning genuine peace into a weapon designed specifically to provoke further frustration. That approach cheapens something real, transforming authentic healing into performance calculated for someone else's reaction rather than something that exists purely for your own benefit. Let your thriving remain genuine, unaffected by whether they're watching or how they're reacting to what they see. What happens if their frustration escalates into direct confrontation? Because sometimes people unable to tolerate your unexpected peace eventually attempt to address it head on. If this person reaches out directly, whether through anger, through manipulation disguised as concern, or through some attempt to reinsert themselves into your life specifically to disrupt your equilibrium, maintain the same composure that's frustrating them in the first place. You're not obligated to engage with attempts to provoke you back into whatever suffering they originally expected. Calm, brief responses, or simply no response at all, protect your peace far more effectively than detailed explanations or defensive justifications ever could. Understand that any attempt to draw you back into emotional turmoil serves their need, not yours. Someone genuinely committed to your well-being wouldn't feel compelled to disrupt your thriving simply because it contradicts their expectations. Recognize this behavior for what it actually represents: continued investment in controlling your emotional trajectory, dressed up as whatever justification makes the attempt feel acceptable to them. There's a broader truth embedded in this entire situation worth carrying forward into every future relationship and interaction, romantic or otherwise. People who cause harm often unconsciously expect their impact to remain permanent, assuming the damage they've done defines your trajectory indefinitely. That expectation reveals more about their own limited imagination than about your actual resilience. You are not obligated to remain wounded simply because someone else's actions once wounded you. Healing doesn't require their permission, their understanding, or their comfort. It simply requires your own consistent choice to prioritize growth over remaining trapped in whatever pain they originally caused. Let this experience become confirmation of a broader truth. Your capacity for resilience exceeds whatever anyone else assumes about your limits, including people who once caused you significant harm and expected that harm to permanently define you. Finally, understand that their frustration, however uncomfortable to witness or navigate, ultimately belongs entirely to them, not to you. You are not responsible for managing someone else's difficulty accepting that their actions didn't produce the devastation they anticipated. That difficulty is theirs to process, theirs to sit with, theirs to eventually resolve however they choose. Your only responsibility remains continuing to build the life you've already started constructing, one grounded in genuine peace, genuine growth, genuine thriving that exists entirely independent of whether it satisfies or frustrates anyone, still measuring their own significance against your emotional state. Let them stay frustrated if that's where they remain. Their inability to accept your resilience doesn't diminish it. If anything, their visible frustration simply confirms exactly how real and how threatening your peace has become to whatever narrative they needed intact. Let's explore a specific psychological pattern worth naming here. The discomfort of watching someone move on faster than expected, and how that discomfort sometimes reveals unresolved feelings the person hasn't fully acknowledged, even to themselves. Sometimes frustration over your resilience isn't purely about guilt management or narrative preservation. Sometimes it's tangled up with lingering attachment they haven't processed honestly. Watching someone thrive after a painful ending can trigger unexpected regret, a sudden confrontation with what was actually lost rather than simply what was left behind. If this person expected devastation and instead witnesses growth, part of their frustration might stem from realizing, perhaps for the first time, exactly how much they might have taken for granted during the relationship itself. This doesn't mean you owe them a second chance or even acknowledgement of that possible regret. It simply means their reaction is likely more complicated than pure malice or simple ego bruising. Understanding that complexity can help you hold compassion for their struggle without feeling obligated to resolve it on their behalf. Consider, too, how this situation might be affecting the people around both of you, because reactions like this rarely stay contained to just the two people directly involved. Mutual friends, family members, or shared social circles often notice this dynamic playing out, sometimes even commenting on it directly to either of you. Some might relay information back and forth, whether intentionally stirring things up or simply sharing observations casually. Be mindful of how you engage with that second-hand information. It's tempting to seek updates about how the other person is processing your thriving, but constantly monitoring their reaction, even indirectly through others, risks pulling your attention back toward them rather than keeping it focused on your own continued growth. Protect your peace from becoming entangled in a second-hand feedback loop. Whatever they're feeling, whatever frustration continues simmering on their end, doesn't require your ongoing awareness or monitoring to remain valid. Let that information reach you incidentally, if it must, without actively seeking it out as confirmation of your own success. There's a final consideration worth addressing. What happens to your own psychology if you notice yourself deriving satisfaction from their frustration? Because that satisfaction, while completely human, deserves honest examination. It's natural to feel a certain vindication knowing someone who once hurt you is now struggling to accept your resilience. That feeling doesn't make you petty or unkind, but watch carefully that this satisfaction doesn't become the primary fuel driving your continued growth. If your thriving starts feeling motivated more by their frustration than by genuine personal fulfillment, that's worth recalibrating. The healthiest version of this peace exists independent of their reaction entirely, satisfying because it's authentically yours, not because it happens to be inconveniencing someone who once caused you harm. Deserves honest examination. It's natural to feel a certain vindication knowing someone who once hurt you is now struggling to accept your resilience. That feeling doesn't make you petty or unkind, but watch carefully that this satisfaction doesn't become the primary fuel driving your continued growth. If your thriving starts feeling motivated more by their frustration than by genuine personal fulfillment, that's worth recalibrating. The healthiest version of this peace exists independent of their reaction entirely, satisfying because it's authentically yours, not because it happens to be inconveniencing someone who once caused you harm.